Hey everybody, welcome back to Living Traditions Homestead. Today is a very exciting day in the garden because this project that we're working on today, has been in the making for really about 8 years.
I have not shared with you all in a long time that I really love to grow herbs. I love to grow lots of things, but really herbs play a special part in my heart, not only because I love to cook and use herbs in my cooking, but I also do like to make natural remedies for different, medical things and use herbs medicinally. But since we've moved here, I really haven't had a permanent place for my herbs. So I've been growing them mostly in the big cattle lick tubs that you guys see us use. And I move them here and there and they do fine, but I've never had a permanent place for them.
The real truth is she would love to have a beautiful herb garden.
Yes.
Instead of just growing them in tubs, which the tubs are completely functional,
Yeah.
but she really wants to have a nice pretty herb garden, which is something in the 8 years that we've lived in Missouri she just hasn't had. That is going to change today.
You know that we have built this beautiful raised bed garden area back here. We started it last fall. This spring is the first time we have planted in it. And we have actually identified some extra space that we can use to create my beautiful herb gardens. And we are going to start that project today.
Now for this project, we're going to be using the same brand of raised beds that we have here, which are by a company called Vajaga. We've been very, very happy with these raised beds. They so far have held up very well. They're supposed to have about a 25-year lifespan, which is great. The only difference is the ones that we're going to be using for Sarah's herb garden are a different shape. They're still going to be the same height. They're going to be a different shape. And they are kind of a new, improved model over the ones that we bought last year. Vajaga is calling it their 2.0 upgrade. We've already put together 2 of them. We're going to show you in just a minute. We've got the 3rd one to put together today. And they seem quite a bit stronger, I think, than even these that we bought last year. Not that these aren't strong, but they're saying that these new ones should be even stronger.
So we're going to show you those raised beds. We're going to put the last one together. We're going to be filling all of the raised beds in this video, and then we're also going to be installing the drip irrigation that we're going to be using. But first, you guys have not seen how well our garden beds have been doing since they were struggling.
Right. If you've been watching us for a while, you know early this spring, our plants were actually doing pretty terrible. We
Right.
thought maybe we might lose the entire garden until we kind of got a handle on what was going on, figured some things out, started fertilizing, started doing all the things we needed to do while this compost ages a little bit. And then the compost will, be a very good medium for growing in. But this year, we needed to do some different things to get the garden under control. So let's take a quick walk around. It's not going to be a full garden tour in this video. We will do one coming up soon, but let's just take a quick walk around and look at how great everything is starting to do.
Well, the first thing that we want to call your attention to, you guys, are these onions. We have 2 beds of onions, and they are doing so amazing. Actually, a lot of them are near ready to be picked. We've never grown onions that look this great. Over here, we've got the dill, and you guys, look at how well it's doing. We thought we weren't going to be getting any dill this year because they were doing so badly. We have 2 beds of okra. You guys, we thought that our okra plants were goners, but they have finally bounced back and they're growing nice and big and strong. Any day now we're gonna have flowers, which means fresh okra is coming.
Now, the one thing that is struggling out here is the squash. Just like it was in the greenhouse, it's about time to pull this because the squash bugs are just kind of taking over. We have harvested quite a bit out here. You can see we've got some lemon squash here that probably need to be harvested today, honestly. And then we'll probably be pulling these plants in the next few days. Behind me are the beans. Look at the beans starting to go up the trellis. We've got 3 trellises here with beans. It's going to be so amazing. We actually picked the first few beans out of here last night, which was exciting. And then on the other side of the trellis, you can see we have cucumbers on this one. We picked about 15 cucumbers last night. And then on the other 2 here, we have tomatoes. And we have a Juliet cherry. And then we have the spoon tomatoes over here. All of those are doing amazing. And you guys, we're just so excited.
So we've identified extra space kind of in the corners of our garden area here, and that's where we're going to be focusing on putting these new raised beds for my herb gardens. You can see this first one back here. It's already put together. Kevin put it together for me one day. Now the size of these are 7.5 feet long on both directions here. They're 2.5 feet wide this direction, and they're 17 inches tall. That is going to be a really great addition to this garden space. Now we have that one here in this corner. One the same size will be in the opposite corner. And then near the front of the garden area, there was actually a little less space in that area. It was going to be a little bit too crowded if we had one of those bigger raised beds. So this one here, Kevin already put together for us as well. It is 5.5 feet long in both directions, 2.5 feet wide, and then also 17 inches high. So we're going to have this smaller one in this corner, two of the bigger ones in the back corners, but we're not going to have one in this far corner because that's where our gate is, where we come and go. So today we need to finish that last one for the far corner, 7.5 feet by 7.5 feet, and then we'll get started filling them.
This is the corner that we're going to be building this last raised bed in. In order to do that, we need to move a couple of these buckets that Sarah currently has some herbs growing in. We're just going to move them over there for now because eventually she'll just be digging some of these up to put into the raised bed. Here's the raised bed that we're going to be putting together today. It's pretty amazing to me that these raised beds can just show up to you in the mail.
Right.
It's actually pretty awesome. So this right here, these two little boxes are going to make our 7.5 by 7.5 raised bed here in this corner. It's just cool to me that you can just order this stuff in the mail these days. All right, let's move these buckets, then we'll start taking parts out and show you what we're going to be doing today. All right, I'm gonna open these up and show you guys what comes in these boxes when you order them. In case you've never seen one before, or you missed the videos that we did last fall where we put together all 21 of these that are currently out here. Now again, because these are the new 2.0 upgrade, they're a little bit different shape. Like the design of them are a little bit different than our current ones. I'll hold one up next to our current one so you can see the difference. So you can see on our current ones, these are the ones we ordered last year, they're like rounded, and these are more squared off, and apparently this is supposed to make them stronger. So at least that's what they say. Time will tell, I guess. They look very similar from a distance. You barely tell the difference. All right, so these are like the flat pieces that go on the beds. Then we also have the curved ends. And then this is that middle corner piece. Now all of these come with a plastic film on them that you need to remove. I can tell you from experience after doing this, if you let them sit out in the sun for a while before you do this, that plastic comes off much, much easier. We also have our rods that go in the middle to give some extra support. The black trim that goes around the top. All of the nuts and bolts and everything that go in them, and a little tool for putting them together. And then finally, the instruction manual. One thing that I do like about these beds is that if you flip through this instruction manual, you can see that they make a ton of different shapes. So you have to buy extra parts sometimes to make some of these shapes, but you can configure these into just pretty much an unlimited amount of shapes if you want to. So I really like that. So that's what's in this box. Now, because we're making these a little bit bigger than what just these parts would make, we had to get one extra box that has a few extra of these side pieces in, or straight pieces in. So we've got those as well. So those will be added to this to make the 7.5 by 2.5 foot bed. All right, so let me show you this plastic film that I'm talking about. You can't really even see it on there, but there is a thin plastic film on every one of these pieces. And I understand why they have to do that to protect it for shipping, but that's the only part of this that's a little bit of a pain, but it's better than ending up with all damaged pieces. So it comes off actually really easily. Honestly, we just bought a new table for our freeze dryer in the house, and that also came with plastic on it, but it was so thin, you guys. It took me longer to get the plastic off than it did to put the table together. This stuff is not like this. This is actually pretty thick, and you can really pull on it, and I've never had it like break, so that's nice. So this, you just kind of get it started, and then you can see that you can just really pull it off pretty quickly. And like I said, especially if it's warm out, you can really pull this off quickly. And then you've got your panel. So we need to do this with every single piece that needs to be put together today. We're going to go ahead and do that. You guys don't need to watch us pull off 100 pieces of plastic. So we'll get that done, and then we'll be back with you when we start putting this together. We're going to start here at the end. So we've got two of our end pieces here, and you see that these just fit together just like this. Now everywhere that there is a hole in any of these pieces, so you can see there's 4 holes at every joint, there will be a screw, a nut, and a washer on every one of those joints. So for every joint we need 4 screws, 4 washers, and 4 nuts. The screw goes from the outside, then it goes a washer, and then a nut like that. What we'd like to do is at first we just go through and we put them all on by hand, and then at the end, once the whole thing is assembled, we'll go back and I use my impact driver and one of the little tools that came with this. You just hold the nut, impact driver on the outside, and tighten it up. It's not a difficult process, but it is a little time consuming, but it does give you a nice strong raised bed when you're done. So Sarah and I are going to work together because it goes a lot faster with 2 people. We're going to get this whole raised bed put together, and then we'll show you what it looks like when we're all done.
Outside, then the inside, correct?
Our raised bed is all put together. You can see it turned out perfectly. The last thing that we need to do though is to put our edge on the top. You can see like on our existing beds here, this is just kind of a guard. This isn't sharp in any way. It's rounded, it's folded over and rounded, so it's not sharp, but this just gives it a nice finished look and does give a little extra, you know, some comfort when you're like leaning over it and stuff like that. So this just really just slides on. Basically, you'll start wherever you want to start it, I like to start toward the back just so that that's where the seam ends up. And then it literally just pushes on. And it stays on pretty tight. We haven't had any of them come off on any of the existing beds. Can be a little tricky sometimes where the two panels meet, but if you just kind of slow down at those spots, it just takes a little extra time to get it over the two pieces. Now when you get to the end, you'll have a little bit extra like this, so you can just cut it. Just cuts with the scissors. Just like that. There we go. That raised bed is complete. We're going to move it into position, and then we're going to get busy starting to fill these up. Well, we made the decision to work on the irrigation system before we fill these beds. The reason that we did that is because these beds are going to be right up against the fence here, and if we fill them first, then we won't have much room to work on the irrigation. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually move the beds out a little bit. We're going to run the irrigation back behind the beds, and that way we can have, it'll just be more comfortable working on it. Now I'm going to set this system up the same way that we set up the system for these for all of our other raised beds out here. If you want a very in-depth tutorial on how this system works, I did a video about that in the spring that was like super in-depth, step-by-step, all the components, everything like that. Go back and check out that video. I will do kind of a brief overview today, but I'm not going to go really in depth. So you can see our system here. Currently we have mainline tubing that runs down each row of our beds, and then in each bed there's these little sprinklers. Our main tube here where we hook up our garden hose runs this way and out over here. When we set the system up, we didn't really plan on adding these extra beds, so we're going to have to make some adjustments today to how all of this works. Luckily, because this piece of mainline tubing is, kind of extra long, I can move it over here to the end of this bed, and then we'll be able to run our new piece off of here. We'll leave just kind of a curve in there so that it's not kinked, and that way we can still hook the garden hose to the same piece. So I'll end up putting a T in here, and then we'll run a solid piece of this 1/2-inch tubing all the way along the back here, all the way along this back side of the garden over here, and around the edge of that other bed on the other end. That's going to be the first thing that we'll do, and then we can install our sprinklers. Right. So this is where we have our piece of mainline tubing, and of course now we need to go off of it this way and then around these beds. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install this T right here, and then just a couple inches from that T I'll install a shutoff valve so we can turn this entire row on and off. All right, so I have that T connector in there now. We're going to install our valve. I've connected just a short piece of 1/2-inch tubing to this, and then we'll just put this onto the T connector like this. Then on the other side of this valve, we'll run a solid piece of this 1/2-inch tubing all the way over to the other side of the garden so that both of these larger raised beds that we just assembled will have a piece of irrigation tubing running behind them. I've got a 100-foot roll of the 1/2-inch tubing. I think it's about 50 or 60 feet over to the other side. To make this a little bit easier, we're going to pick this bed up and we're going to move it out so that we have a little more room to work behind the bed. That's the reason that we're doing this before we fill it, because obviously once we fill these, we have no option to move them. Now that we've got the main line run all the way over to this end, I've cut it off over here. I left a little bit extra. We can always cut it shorter later on. Now we're gonna actually get ready to start putting our drippers in, or our sprinklers in. On these beds, I think we're gonna do 5. I think we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in each bed. I think that should be plenty. Again, we can always add more later on if we think we need more, or if Sarah, adds a bunch of plants and thinks we need 1 by each plant or something like that, we can add more later on. All right, so we're gonna put our first emitter in here. I think we'll put it right about here, right after our shutoff valve. This is just kind of a hole punch for the main line tubing here. So we just put that on like this, punch a hole, and then we use one of these little barbs, and that goes into that hole. Onto that, we'll connect this 1/8 inch flexible tubing. This is actually all quite a bit easier on a day like today because it's hot out here, and this stuff is a lot easier to work with actually when it's hot. So we'll cut this. Because I don't know exactly where they're going to go in this bed, I'm going to leave it a little bit on the long side. And then we'll just hook our sprinkler onto our tubing like that. And like I said, for now, we'll just kind of put these up over the fence until we're all done filling these beds later on. And then we'll be able to put these in and start watering this and see how it works. All right, let's take some time to talk about what we're going to be filling these raised beds with. If you've been following us throughout this growing season so far, you know about the problems that we've had with the compost that we used in our other beds, these 21 other beds that we have out here.
These raised beds are filled 100% with organic compost. We got that compost delivered last fall. We filled these beds in the fall so that they could sit and kind of finish composting over the winter so that we could plant in them in spring.
What we didn't realize at the time, and because of our own lack of knowledge of how some of this stuff works, is that even though this compost is no longer hot, compost takes several years before all of the nutrients are available to the plants.
Right.
So that caused quite a bit of problem early on in our growing season this year, and we had to really kind of make some drastic changes partway through the season in order to get everything to look as good as it does now. We didn't want to duplicate that same problem in these new raised beds, so we're going with a little bit different approach.
Also, the compost that we had was delivered, and in order to get a delivery of compost from that company, you need to order a semi-truck load of that compost. Well, we don't need that much compost. So for all of those reasons, we actually decided that this go-round we were going to be using a mixture of different bag soils to fill the remainder of the raised beds.
It just so happens that Menards, which is in Springfield about an hour away from us, was having some great deals. I think maybe because we're going to get into the time of year where major planting time is done. They had some really good sales going on, and we were able to pick up 3 different things for these raised beds that we're going to be using today. Now, we're in no way affiliated with any of this. Like I said, we just went to Menards and bought all of this, brought it home on our trailer, and put it over here with the tractor. But what we're going to be using today is a combination of potting soil. In fact, we're going to be filling these beds. Half of what's going to go in the bed is potting soil. So we bought this Schultz potting soil. We also are going to be using, the other half is going to be split into 2 things. It's going to be this mushroom compost. So we bought this organic bagged mushroom compost. And then the other quarter of that is going to be an organic compost and manure mix, these bags down here.
Now this combination of soils is actually what we have been using in the greenhouse. We have amazing results in the greenhouse, as you guys have seen, so we're really sure that this is going to be a great combination of soils to just get us going right away in these remaining raised beds.
Now, I've learned over time that on videos like this, if we don't talk about prices of things, that there is always wild speculations about how many hundreds of thousands of dollars we spent to buy all of this bagged mix. So I thought I would just kind of set the record straight. Like I said, Menards was running some really good deals, and because of the rebates that they offer, it brings the prices even lower. So we were able to get these 2 cubic foot bags of Schultz potting soil for about $8 a bag. The mushroom compost, we were able to get those for about $2 a bag. And then the compost manure mix was also about $2 a bag. So in total for all of this, it was just under $600. So a little under $200 per bed to fill these up. Now, yes, that is quite a bit of money, and it is quite an investment up front to fill these, but you guys, it's kind of a one-time deal. Yes, every year we're going to have to add a little bit here and there, but we're never going to have to spend this much again on these beds. It's an initial startup cost, and you know, it's just kind of what you have to do to get a good mix to get going. So that's where we're at. I thought I would just tell you guys right up front what we spent on all this so that you kind of know what you're in for if you're doing something like this. I highly suggest you watch for things like this to go on sale, because when it does, you can get much better prices. Now, you probably know me well enough by now to know that I had to do some nerdy garden math in order to figure out how everything was going to work here. So, we have two different size raised beds. We have these two over here, which are the 7.5 by 2.5 raised beds, and then the other one is a 5.5 by 2.5. So the bigger beds are going to get, according to my calculations here, 11 bags of potting soil each, and then 15 bags of the mushroom compost and 15 bags of the manure compost mix. We want to do these kind of in layers so that it just doesn't end up with like all the potting soil on the bottom and then all the, so we want to do this in kind of layers. So we're going to do 3 different layers. Each layer on these bigger beds is going to consist of 3 2/3 bags of potting soil, 5 bags of mushroom compost, and 5 bags of the manure. And then we'll kind of mix all of that together, and then we'll do another layer. So we need to get all of this put into these raised beds yet today. It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon right now, which is the hottest part of the day. We're going to work as much as we can. Today is actually the coolest day of the entire week, so even though it is quite warm out, it's only going to get hotter from here throughout the week. So if we can get this done today, that will be great. If not, if we just get too hot, we may have to come back out in the morning and finish it up in the morning, but we'll see how far we can get today. So we've got everything over here that we need for our first layer in these raised beds. We're going to kind of show you guys what everything looks like for this first layer, but then honestly, we're just going to get the rest of it done because it's going to be the same thing over and over and over to get these filled up. So again, this first layer is going to be 3 bags of the potting soil, a little over 3 bags, like 3.5 bags of potting soil, 5 bags of the mushroom compost, and 5 bags of the compost and manure mix. And then we'll mix that together, and then we'll do another layer just like that. We'll mix that together, and then we'll do a 3rd layer just like that, and that should fill this bed. We do need to be a little careful of these. Make sure nothing like drops on those.
So we have the first layer of all 3 types of soils that we're going to be using. So now I'm really just gonna kind of mix these up with my hands. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just to mix them around a little bit. Combine all 3 of those layers. I'm really hesitant to use any kind of tool to help me do this because we want to make sure that the weed fabric remains intact on the bottom so that none of the crazy weeds that we have here in southern Missouri, they can't grow up through the bottom. That's why we're not cutting holes underneath the raised beds and letting kind of just the bare ground be there. We want the weed fabric to stay there to help us control weeds. If I were to use metal instruments to help me mix this up, there's a chance that I could cut it or nick it or slash it, and I don't want that to happen.
So we are just going to keep doing the same thing over and over. We'll show you when we get this first raised bed done, and then we're just going to keep doing the same thing on the other 2 raised beds until they're all done.
Well, the first raised bed is done. We do need to put the sprinklers on there. Now, we did end up filling this raised bed and not using all the bags that we had planned on. So we have some extras, but after watering these for a couple days, it's possible that they may settle, and so then we'll have to come and kind of backfill and fill them up to the top again a little bit. But they are looking fantastic. We've got 2 more to go. We're gonna do the littler one first.
Well, we worked until dark last night, but we didn't quite get finished. All in all, we worked about 10 hours on this project yesterday, along with all of the other things we need to do here on the homestead, but 10 hours about just on this project between setting up that new raised bed, filling with dirt, and setting up the irrigation system.
There are a few more things for us to do this morning to wrap this project up. We do need to finish filling this bed here and make sure that all of the sprinkler heads are where they need to be, and then test the sprinkler system, the irrigation system, and make sure that it's working properly. And then this project is done until I fill it with herbs.
I think our plan is going to be over the next couple days to run the irrigation system a couple times a day to really make sure that all of this potting soil and everything has plenty of moisture in it, and to also get everything to settle so that before Sarah starts planting, we can top these back off if we need to.
I am anxious to get planting in here, but I also want the soil to be as kind of settled as possible before I put perennials in here.
So we still have 5 more bags of manure, 5 more bags of the mushroom compost, and then 1 final bag of the potting soil to add to this bed. And then this one will be done, and we can test out the sprinkler system on all 3 beds. All 3 raised beds are completely filled. We have all of the sprinklers in place. Last thing we have to do for this project is to test them out and make sure everything works. So I already have the garden hose connected over here. We already have it on. I'm going to turn this first valve on and we'll see what happens with these sprinklers. Now it will take a second for all of this tubing that we put down to fill up with water, so look at that, perfect. Let's go down and check the one on the other end. Looks like these are doing great as well. I think we can probably run that smaller bed down on the other end of the garden at the same time as these. So let's go turn that one on as well.
Well, you guys, this is an amazing job done for us. I am so excited to have a permanent place to plant all my herbs, and I think within the next couple of days I will be able to get started doing that in the mornings while it's still cool, because you guys, we are coming into a very long stretch of very hot and humid weather. Well, you guys, we're so happy that you joined us today while we tackled this big project. If you are interested in learning more about these awesome raised beds from Vijayga, we would love for you to check out the link in the description of this video. But also you can learn more about them on our website, livingtraditionshomestead.com.
If you haven't been to our website lately, I recommend you go there. We recently redid it. We also have a weekly newsletter that's absolutely free where we send you guys an email every Sunday with just some kind of behind the scenes things that are happening here on the homestead. We'd love for you to sign up for that as well.
If you're enjoying videos like this, make sure that you hit the subscribe button below. And remember, the best way you can help us here on the homestead is just to share our videos. We would appreciate it. Until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care and God bless.
God bless.